Madam Chief Justice, Chief Judge Ellington, members of the judiciary, and the legislature and Board of Governors, fellow Georgia lawyers, and friends. You've given me an honor far beyond anything I possibly could have deserved. When I hung a shingle at a former blacksmith shop in Douglasville some years ago, and Phyllis Holman was down the street, with no windows, no insulation, a borrowed desk, a borrowed typewriter, and just enough buckets to put under all the leaks in the roof. Nobody would have foreseen this, and neither did I. I didn't foresee it until just a very short time ago. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I really want to thank the presidents who've come before me. Lester Tate, Brian Cavan, Jeff Bramlett, Gerald Edenfield, and the last 15 or so before them with whom I worked less directly. They've been terrific mentors and friends, and I will keep them all on speed dial in the coming year. They have, anything that we do right and any success that we have in the coming year is largely due to the groundwork they have laid, because we begin this year with a terrific situation in terms of the financial stability of the bar, in terms of our relationships with the Capitol, and with the judiciary. So I'm starting out ahead of the game due to their work. As we look to the coming year, there are three themes that I want to focus on: stewardship, calling, and love. About 235 years ago, a bunch of guys, and they were all guys at that time, in knee breeches and little funny ponytails, gathered in a cramped, hot, probably smelly room in Philadelphia. And they talked about, they issued a declaration that referred to the inalienable rights endowed by our Creator. And those rights have been secured by the blood of patriots and ground out and refined by the conflict and labor of generations of Americans striving for a better life for their children and for themselves. And now we're the stewards of that. I spent about, a bunch of years working with my son's scout troop. And at every time we broke camp, we lined up the boys fingertip to fingertip and swept the campsite area looking for debris, trash, and inevitably they would find a bunch of little bits of debris that had been there probably for years and years and removed it. We tried to impress upon them the importance of leaving the campsite a little cleaner than they found it. Well, as lawyers and judges, as stewards of this system of law and justice, we need to leave our campsite, the legal system, the legal profession, a little cleaner and a little better than we found it, and pass it on to our children and our grandchildren a little better. Now, there are a number of ways we can approach that. And in our brief period of time over the next year, some of the things that I want us to focus on in the area of stewardship of the system start with the court system. What do we want the court system to look like in 20 years when most of us, at least I, will hopefully no longer be practicing law? And how do we get from here to there? We're appointing a Next Generation Courts Commission chaired by Lawton Stevens, a member of this board, who was a Superior Court judge in Athens and a former legislator, to look at those broad questions about the court system. We're not quite ready to release the list of members of that commission yet because we want to take our time and get it right and touch all the appropriate bases in the judiciary and elsewhere as we do it. But among other things, it will look at how do we get a statewide e-filing system in the state trial courts, comparable in function to what we see in the federal courts. we've had a committee that's been chaired by Judge Besson, that's been working the last couple of years coming up with a proposed uniform rule that you'll hear about today. But we've got to come up with, how do we build it? How do we fund it? How do we run it? How do we actually do it? And that's one of the things this commission will look at. Other things about case flow management, and frankly, virtually the entire scope of questions about public policy and the running of the judiciary will be in the scope of this, and we'll be touching bases with all the appropriate people in the judicial branch. My home state of Alabama has for several years, the state where I was born, Georgia's home, has had for several years an e-filing system in the state courts, in the trial courts. So, and some of the counties in Alabama now do probably more extensively what a few of our judges here are doing, which is controlling case flow management with early status conferences and scheduling orders. So folks, one thing we want to do in the next year is catch up with Alabama. It's a shameful thing to say for Georgia, to say we got to catch up with Alabama, but let's work on it. Another thing that we'll be working on this year really starts at the Capitol. Governor Deal, Chief Justice Hunstein, Lieutenant Governor Cagle, and Speaker Ralston got together at the beginning of the last legislative session to propose a criminal justice reform council to look at Georgia's sentencing laws. Lester and I met with the governor, and I said, well, Governor, I thought about appointing a bar committee on that, but you beat me to it, and now I guess don't have to. And he turned to us, and he said, no, you go ahead anyway, and then they put me on the council. We have a committee on criminal justice reform chaired by Pat Head, a member of this board, who is also the district attorney of Cobb County and outgoing president of the Prosecuting Attorneys Council. Pat convened the first meeting of that committee this past Tuesday. We had a packed house, standing room only practically, with prosecutors, judges, and defense attorneys looking at, beginning to look at the questions dealing with sentencing laws, these mandatory minimum sentences that tie judges' hands, community-based corrections alternatives, and so forth. The points were made by seasoned district attorneys that judges need to be able to have the discretion to distinguish between a 17-year-old with 2 beers and a squirt gun and a 35-year-old with an AK-47, as one example. Our committee will work very closely in conjunction with the State Council on criminal justice reform and the Pew Center on the States, which has a think tank that's working with state governments around the country on these questions. The focus in criminal justice always has to be on public safety, and we can't get away from that. But we can be both tough on crime and smart on crime, and that will be the focus on that effort. That's very closely related to indigent defense, which the bar has been working on for years and years. Brian Cavan, our outgoing past president, has graciously agreed to chair the Indigent Defense Committee as we move forward this next year. At the last session of the legislature, with Representative Rich Golick taking the leadership, progress is made on the governance aspect of that. It may not be perfect, but the perfect is the enemy of the good, and it's better than it could be. And this next year, I expect that our effort will go forward with trying to secure a reliable income stream for funding indigent defense. And Brian is the person that needs to be there for that continuity.